This is James Bartley. You're listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. My very special guest tonight is my dear friend Solaris Blue Raven, who in the first hour was talking about how she was inducted into a remote neural interface mind control program and what she's had to do to get grounded, to reintegrate, to heal. And also she spoke about who the perpetrators were, what their agenda is, and why they seem to be doing this. So without any further ado, here in our second hour, Solaris, would you like to continue your story?
Right, and thank you, James. I just want to say it's an honor to be on your show, and I wish you all the success in the world with this radio show. You are a phenomenal person. You are very intelligent. You are expanded in so many areas. So I'm very happy that you have a radio show, and I just want to say I'm very honored to be here, and you're a dear spiritual brother to me, and so I'm very happy to be on board with you tonight. Just want to point that out.
Thank you. I feel the same way, Solaris.
Thank you. And it's interesting because, you know, we were talking a little bit off air here about alternate timelines, and I kind of touched on the fact that when you get inundated with this type of technology where they're infusing so many different parameters for different behavioral patterns and programming, even though I maintained my own center and connected to my higher self, what I call oversoul superconscious, and my soul dissension energies, it seemed to me like there were so many remnants and signatures that I almost feel like I still have remnants of other things in me that don't belong to me. So it's very interesting. It's not like I have alters, but it's like different types of imprinting. Let's put it that way. I don't know if you ever saw Dollhouse. I don't know if you ever watched Dollhouse.
I've heard about it. I should watch it.
You might want to check it out. And I don't watch television, but I wound up seeing this at a friend's house. And this friend of mine is a contactee, but it's very interesting because this is right there in the parameters of mind control, psychotronic programming, and creating imprinting for a host. And all this movie is about, this show, rather, it's a series, is imprinting these women who are hosts for technology and different personalities. And they're upgrading them, and they're using a computer system to put them in this little chamber where they're actually getting almost like heterodynes with different personalities. Now, this is what's interesting, James, is that they're using this. They're deploying it in mainstream. People are eating it up and watching it as entertainment, yet they don't understand that this is actually happening.
I just saw something like this the other night. I watched the movie Neverland with George Clooney, and really what it was all about was it was pro-transhumanist artificial intelligence propaganda, that the ideal that for humanity in the future is to be basically an android, an advanced bionic humanoid being that has all these superpowers but is really at its core a machine. And typical of, it's a Disney movie, by the way, of course, and typical of the propaganda, the main characters, the main androids, are children, and they're depicted in the film Neverland as, or is it Tomorrowland? I keep getting it mixed up, but the children are seen as the vanguard of the future, and the children in this story are all artificial intelligence androids.
Makes sense to me. And I believe that that's actually going on just because of where I've been with the artificial telepathy and the type of communication they use. Once they plug these kids in, they're automatically been augmented. And it's not like they're really getting upgraded with a perfect, like, ascended machine technology. This is man's machine. So it's really not the ascended machine we want to merge with insofar as symbiotic intelligence goes. But I'll tell you, I know that they're doing that. And also, when I look at the children and the embryos, and some people are saying, well, they're all star children. And I'm really kind of looking back, and I'm saying, I don't think they're all star children. I don't think they're all star seeds. I think some of them have been modified by these covert programs. And that creates a whole different ballpark of a different type of unit or person or whatever we want to call it. But I think you're right. We're dealing with transhumanism. It's like the Elysium. It's for the elite and the illusion of elite. It's for the super wealthy. And in my opinion, I think that they're just trying to test beings like us, but really they're taking the templates and keeping them for themselves.
Yes, they still desire a worker class. They still desire a serf class. So if they con this young generation, the upcoming generations, into the deceit that technology is inherently good, that the people who make the technology are inherently good, and the technology is for the greater good, they're going to eat it up. We're seeing more and more inroads into the very psyche, the very soul of digital device users, and they're really targeting the kids, like just promoting biometrics, promoting the interface with humans and technology. The problem that I see is that there's so many, for lack of a better term, empty vessels in our day and age, where these are people that they have the outward trappings of being a human, but through genetic manipulation, through whatever archontic methodology, they wind up being these empty vessels, which makes them ideal as hosts for negative entities and or this digital interface. And it's interesting that you pointed out in the first half how the controllers kept wanting wanting you to divest yourself of any kind of normal human emotion. You weren't allowed to cry. You only were supposed to stay in this kind of this state which was pleasing to them. You could not or would not be allowed to manifest the normal range of human emotions. And we're seeing this with this next generation of children, where so much of their feelings and their emotions and understanding, it's almost an abstraction, where they can see that someone is being bullied in school, but rather than stand up for the kid being bullied, they stand around and they film it with their cell phone cameras, and they put it on YouTube and further add to the humiliation. It's like the kid being bullied is not even a real person. It's an abstraction. It's like they turned it into art. Almost.
It's almost like virtual reality. Everything is a simulation, and their brainwave activity becomes a simulation because of the AI interface. So I'm pretty sure that you're right. It's like they're a host for a technology that's not based on source. It's not based on spirit or soul or consciousness. And it is, anything electrical, as you well know, can actually facilitate more entities attaching. So once again, once they have the host activated through the communication system, then other entities can hitch a ride, and who knows what they're going to have. But it reminds me of that Time Machine movie, the original Time Machine, when the woman Weena's drowning and they're all just sitting there and they just don't care.
Yes.
It's the same. I see that in my own community, James. It's just like that whole mentality. It's the disassociation of anything. It's just like programming, big time programming.
And it seems like the only emotions that are being engendered and encouraged are the base emotions of rage, of greed, of rapaciousness, etc. The key emotions and feelings of concern, of care, of love, all that's left by the wayside. That's made to look sissified. It's made to look not chic. It's made to look not cool anymore. And so what's left on the platter? You either have rage, greed, boorishness on the one hand, or you have this empty vessel aspect on the other, where people just have this glassy-eyed kind of droid Borg kind of countenance, where no matter what goes on around them, they're just completely they don't care. They're apathetic. They're just at a loss.
Exactly.
Not tuned in.
Totally, I totally agree with you on that one. Yeah, they're tuned into the wrong frequency. There's no doubt about that one. They're just.
That's right. It's a frequency war.
Yeah, it totally is a frequency war, and it's very concerning, especially after where I've been. And I've always teetered between worlds. When I came out and I communicated the truth, and I thought everybody needed to know, and I was very adamant and thinking that we've got to, communicate this. This can be harmful to everybody. And now as I look at the progressions after all these years, I can tell you, I would say a very small percentage is getting the data and understanding the data and respects the data. And everybody else is really psyched to be part of the transhumanism. So I'm kind of wondering to myself, did I waste my time in the illusion of, but I don't think so, because for those of us who are very advanced in consciousness, we all automatically have ascension codes. We don't need it. We have immortality. We already have it. So why do you need to immortalize yourself in a black box of AI when you already have all these components? It never made sense to me with the transhumanism.
Yes, likewise. And for the listeners, as a person who's in the process of this ascension, as someone who recognizes that you have within you the ascension codes, what is the mindset? What is the internal feeling you have, especially having gone through what you have gone through with the AI interface? What do you do on a daily basis to keep yourself centered, keep yourself grounded, and keep your eyes on the prize, so to speak, of ascension, of getting to the next level of spirituality?
Well, it's really interesting because it's as if I don't want to say they ripped anything away, but they definitely put a hole through me. and interconnect me with this technology. So I'm gradually recalibrating to multidimensional higher states of consciousness and my multidimensional design work, which is very ascension-oriented. The one thing that I'm very clear on also is they tried to run interference with my soul descension, soul extension energies, which are star family off-planet. So that's the contactee database, in other words. So that I am recalibrating, and I'm just doing my affirmations as I've always done. I'm doing things to raise my vibration, keeping myself as healthy as possible and training. But I also realize that there's a side to me that grieves, James, because it's been a violation. I can't explain it other than the fact that it feels like so many beautiful, sacred design works were shredded. It was almost like they just went and they just blasted me with this technology and then utilized it and extracted all this beautiful light and energy, and so they could create this whatever that is template. So I am spending time recalibrating, but it has helped me to be on radio, to write my books, to communicate and lecture, and know that there's this big multiverse out there that we're all merged with. And another thing is I'm aware that I'm here on the timeline, but I also am aware that most of me, if not, I would say a great portion of me, is actually off planet. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to reactivate itself, but I do realize that I'm here, but I'm also there. And I think that might have happened when they initially inducted me. So it's hard, it's kind of complex to say, but it's a very abstract, multidimensional concept of where I'm feeling. And so basically, my multidimensional design work is intact, but I have aspects of me that I feel are very much anchored in other sectors in the illusion of the multiverse. So I think what happens when you get pulled into those projects is that most of your multidimensional design work sort of it connects itself and stabilizes into other higher dimensional states to oversee what's going on, even on a traumatic level. So that's my own take anyway, insofar as how I've been dealing with things and receiving energy in my own design work. And I know that sounds really complex, but it's a very complex communication system that I was inducted into.
I would agree with that, because from what I've gathered listening to the testimony of a lot of project people, my labs, people that have been pulled into these weird science projects, oftentimes involving non-human intelligences, it seems that in some cases that where the military controllers and the negative ET controllers may be able to access somebody in their physical 3D body and also at times seemingly activate and access metaphysical powers, even a higher dimensional aspect of a given individual's being. That is not the totality of their experience. There are aspects of their higher dimensional selves that are interacting with higher dimensional, spiritually evolved ETs or beings, for lack of a better term. And in some cases, they seem to be almost operating on a standalone basis, where they may at times interact with spiritually evolved higher dimensional beings, but at the same time, or on other occasions, they may be doing their own operations, their own standalone operations that does not involve positive beings. They're doing good work on their own, either by themselves or with a team of people. Because we are multidimensional beings, and we've just been brainwashed into believing that we are so limited in our perception, in our abilities, and our capabilities. But the higher dimensional, spiritually evolved beings and our oversoul, and I love that term, the oversoul, it knows what we're capable of. And although our physical 3D bodies may be subjected to a lot of hardship at times, especially those that have been plugged into these mind control programs, there's an element of them that is still higher dimensional that cannot be interfered with or cannot
exactly.
be
That's
cannot
so true. And
turned,
I guess the downside of where I've been is that I would have been okay had I just kind of merged with a very black space program and just moved on. You know what I mean? I think that using me as a test pilot for various programs and knowing that I did very well with these things, and then having it just be so disrespected kind of bothered me. And I'll tell you, and the listeners, this is probably the first time you'll ever hear this, is that I've had live feed, I've had real-time experiences with what I would say are military. And this is something that happened later on, like about 8 years later down the road, where I've seen people who have like generals in the room, and I'm working with things in that planetary systems. Now, I'm sure of that being real. I'm sure of that being connected to the Black Space Program. And there was a specific group and a specific general that actually said goodbye to me, and he retired. And this is, I'm telling you guys this because I found it very profound. and I knew it was real. And I don't know if I'll ever meet these people. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. But I'll tell you, there are some good people out there, James. I know there are. I don't think all of them are bad. You know,
I
yeah,
believe
and I
that
also
too.
know that when I got pulled into this program, even though I was going through some torturous avenues with the band, there was something else there too. Other people, other divisions, and some of them weren't that bad. So it was kind of like the good cop, bad cop syndrome, where you have, you know, good forces versus bad forces, all kind of there. But I remember at the subconscious level, and I guess this is where we have some kind of recall about people we've never physically seen, but we know that we've had a communication with in another, whether it's another alternate reality, dimensional space, or more like with me with a live feed real time. And another thing that comes to mind too is entanglement. And I'm always wondering about the entanglement aspects of that band doing what they did and rifting my entire life, how the entanglement happens and what happens to them down the road of a parallel. Because it seems to me like whatever they did to me is entangling them for a very long time on a different scale. I could be wrong, but that's just my take.
Yes, because there is such a thing as the law of unintended consequences. And with the gradual increase in frequency of this plane, this negative bandwidth which a lot of these lower density beings operate in is going by the wayside. Their operating frequencies, their operating bandwidth is narrowing all the time. So time is on our side. The wonderful term you use, the illusionary time frequency, is on our side. It does seem at turns to be speeding up, and at other times it seems, because of the time manipulation that has gone on, it seems that sometimes we look back and a span of 5 years seems 10 years. But paradoxically, in our moment-to-moment existence, time seems to be speeding up. And I do believe that only benefits us, and it does not benefit them.
Go ahead. I was going to say, what occurred to me as you were speaking, when you said time was speeding up, it's the frequency that's speeding up. In other words, the frequency is speeding up because time is an illusion and a benchmark of measure, which makes perfect sense. You know, when we talk about time dilation, we're talking about frequencies insofar as opening up and dilating the illusion of gateways and stargates. You know, what's interesting also, and I don't want to mention Rush a whole lot tonight, but I do want to point out that they did a time-traveling tour, and that was very significant, so to speak.
Well, that's interesting, yes. And I remember when, and just to, you know, put a finishing touch on Rush for the evening, I remember when they would put out these multimedia videos on these big view screens during their concerts, and one of them featured the Witch Hunt song, where they've got the villagers going, you know, with the torches, and they're all in a frenzied state, and they're chasing a witch through the woods, and it's just, you know, when I think of what you've gone through, when I think of what you've experienced, and then they put out a video like that, it's,
you know what's interesting?
It's really
I
kind of a mind blower.
Witch video that my Revolution Radio station manager saw. He said he woke up in the middle of the night and there was like something on television. It was that, and he saw that video, and the first thing that came in was me. He says I kept thinking about you when I saw that, and I was, because obviously my background in the craft. Now, I haven't seen this video, but I do know, and I can tell you point blank, they put things out tongue-in-cheek with videos, cartoons, animation. If you really follow their animation closely and what they put out while they're on tour and the pictures they're showing, it is all about the interconnection program with the psychotronics and all involved.
Yes, it is. Some of their biggest albums are almost entirely based on the transhumanist aspect and a futuristic, dystopic, Orwellian-type world. And they're not warning us about it. They're telling us this is what we want. So enough about that. Enough about them. But we can switch gears. And one thing that I've noticed about this increasing frequency is that for people like yourself and others that are so inclined, that have this ascension code embedded in their morphic resonance field, even for some very grounded, very metaphysically adept people, it's been a difficult adjustment phase. We've gone through a period of really dense energy in the recent past, whether it's due to some kind of astronomical / astrological alignments and whatever kinds of ceremonies and whatever kinds of mass carrier wave frequencies that are being beamed out. We've gone through a phase when a lot of people, like yourself, have had to endure a lot of hardship. And at the same time, what we've also seen is those people that were, maybe they were not a full-on host for malign entity in the past. Maybe they were borderline. A lot of people in that borderline category, they're basically going crazy now. They just cannot adapt to the fluctuations of these frequencies and the frequency shifts. They're basically going mad,
right.
And they're turning into berserkers. So we're going through a phase. I think it's the phase that's going to lead into the next stage of how this whole thing develops and unfolds. How have you observed this also in your own personal life? How these frequencies are affecting even normal people?
I see a lot of interference patterns being run insofar as regular dirty electricity, and you can call it ultra-low frequency and things like that that's going on, which is causing erratic behavior in people because it is a kind of a mind control program. And I will say with ascension energies, as they descend onto the planet, as you know and as I know, if you can't hold that frequency and you can't calibrate to higher dimensional spaces of consciousness, you can start to fracture or fragment. It's just like time traveling in the illusion. You really have to stabilize, and you have to ask spirit to stabilize and spin your field, and also spin out any discordant energies that you're picking up on, because as you progress, you're dropping density, but you're also dropping entities, and you're moving through dimensional spaces, as each one is it's almost like a radio frequency. So you're ascending through different dimensional spaces, but there could be entity attachment in those spaces. So we have to shed those skins, so to speak. And I have seen people kind of losing it. Obviously, there's psychotronics being deployed and covert frequencies that are happening, and people who are vulnerable, who don't pay attention and are open to receiving all kinds of frequency, especially when they're attached to their computers and their iPhones. They're going to get hit with all kinds of things and act a little bit crazy. And I'm seeing a zombification, in my opinion, of a majority of people here across the globe, especially in America.
Yes, what I'm seeing is a Bolshevization, a collectivist mindset. It's how they can just whip up out of thin air, seemingly, all these social justice warriors, many of them just kids. And young adults, where a lot of them probably have the empty vessel syndrome to begin with, and they're very easy to indoctrinate and imbue with the compulsion and desire to be part of a big faceless organization where they can throw their weight around, and where they may not have had a voice in the past. Now they're part of an organization which is funding them, which is arming them, essentially publicizing them. And they're turning these social justice warriors loose all over the place, and they're really pushing a variety of social engineering agendas. They're really pushing hard for the complete abandonment of the freedom of speech, the freedom of association, the freedom of everything. And when I look at these young social justice warriors, and up to middle age even and older, it's the empty vessel syndrome. I just see like this glassy kind of expression in their eyes and their faces, kind of a blankness to them.
Well, it's kind of like mind control. It's a sleeper cell activation. I look at these people as being activated through sleeper cell technology, because it's a different kind of technology. It's not the Manchurian assassin program, but it's more of a soft kind of mind control program where they're just being activated to be disturbing people. And obviously there's programs running in them, because half of their behavior is irrational. It's not functioning normally. Their neurons obviously aren't functioning right. It's quite interesting to observe this. But this is a pattern that's happening. Wherever we ascend, it seems like there's a resistance coming through to try to restrict our evolution in consciousness, which is, by universal law, we have the right to ascend. It's a universal protocol that you don't have a right to control, manipulate, dump down, switch off DNA. I'm sorry, you don't. And I'm talking about on the global scale with these cabals. And I think we're seeing a little of this going on with the EU right now, and how the UK is trying to break orbit. So I think that things are shifting insofar as moving to higher levels and embracing one's freedom. But, I think we're going to have some upheavals here. And this is why I said, and we touched on this kind of off air, is I feel like our planet and the illusion of is like it's not supposed to be here. Something's switched a little bit. It's a little teetered. It's a little off, like an alternate reality. So I think that, honestly, the process of ascension as it naturally is has been hijacked to some degree. It doesn't mean we're not going to get there. It just means that they're running interference, and they are steering. It seems to me like they're trying to steer, like we were talking about the Mandela effect. They're almost trying to steer an alternate reality and push an alternate reality very, very hard. And as we know, our thoughts create reality. So if you have a whole mass collective of people, and they're all trying to create this matrix for you, we've got to counter that with our own divine energies.
Yes, and more than ever, people really should hang on strongly to the concept of personal sovereignty, of personal responsibility, of one's own connection to divine source, of being grounded, of being embodied, and yet at the same time pulling in ever higher dimensional frequencies that allows our energetic bodies, our ethereal bodies, our higher dimensional aspects of ourselves to operate more freely, to do more work while we're in the sleep state, for example. So what I've had to do, just me personally, I've had to kind of detach from a lot of the matrix, even the alternative news, which quite frankly and understandably can at times be quite negative, and a lot of it is negative reinforcement. However factual, however valid and timely, when one immerses themselves into such information again and again and again, one cannot help but start to resonate at a lower frequency of fear, paranoia, of rage, etc., etc. And I've been there. I've been at that stage where my righteous indignation was spiking, through the roof. And it's not surprising that it was during that time period when I was most outraged and most indignant at all these injustices, is when I was personally getting hammered from all sides, because I opened the door, so to speak. I instead of like water off a duck's back and saying, okay, I recognize that for what it is, I'm not going to allow it to influence me, I'm moving on, I kind of wallowed in it, and as a result, I got hammered. And so what I've had to learn over time is, okay, I could recognize this for what it is. Oh, another ridiculous hoax, false flag event. Okay, I recognize it for what it is, move on. And I've had to keep my eyes on the prize. I had to keep my eyes on this greater ascension aspect, because there are much bigger things at work that we have to
I totally agree with you.
Keep in
it's
mind.
Funny because I know we both kind of have warrior spirits. I mean, we're very fierce on a multidimensional scale, and I certainly don't back down from anything, and I do see myself polarizing with a lot of evil here on this illusion of a timeline. After where I've been especially, there's a fierce side to me that's really ready to get out there in the battlefield. But I'll also say, by me putting my attention on it just for myself, sometimes not getting too absorbed in it, but actually putting my attention on it is breaking the spell. In other words, if I address something, I'm breaking the spell. I'm a spell breaker. I'm taking down their power by breaking it down and seeing it for what it is. It's almost like I'm shining a light on it. I'm not looking in fear. I'm not looking in anger. I'm beyond rage. I'm beyond that emotional content. I'm just trying to break the spell of the program. And for me, that's been helpful, especially working in media, because I do address a lot of things that are very noxious. I mean, a lot of agendas that are out there that are totally bad. And I know, James, there's times when I just want to say I need a break from everything, and I don't want to do any radio, and I just need to, like, bury my head in some sea salt and, go into some kind of a chamber of some kind and regenerate. But yeah, I mean, it's I think we're here for a specific reason, and I know I never like to say that, because I'm like, I hate the idea of having to been contracted onto the planet, But I do see that we are leaders, we are spiritual teachers.
Yes.
Even if we don't want to be, we're here as role models and avatars for a future galactic civilization. And we are reminding those of us who resonate at that bandwidth, that frequency, that we are those star people and that we need to step up to the galactic neighborhood. And I really think that's important. We can't get stuck in this false matrix. And this is why I want to break the spell. I want to break the spell of the mind control, the programming, the trauma-based mind control, all this stuff. I want to break it up and just shake it down and let it go so we can move on.
Yes, and it's almost a game that I play when I do watch movies, and I do watch TV programming, underline programming 3 times, is, okay, there's another one. There's another little data point of propaganda and social engineering they threw at me. There's another one. And then, just to amuse myself, I just recognize it and then let it wash over me, and then I just continue to watch the movie or whatever it is and enjoy it on, not its own merits, but on my own merits. I've learned to take away. What they've done to us is they've gradually tried to take away everything, our rights, take away our ability to discern, make us all shame-based and guilt-ridden over this, that, or the other. And what I've done over time is I've taken back. No, I'm not going to be shame-based about this, that, or the other. I'm not going to be guilt-ridden about something that I had no party to. I'm here to do good, I like to think. So why should I feel guilty and burdened by guilt, which doesn't belong to me, quite frankly, right? So gradually over time, I've begun to take from them what rightfully belongs to us anyway. And that in itself is an empowering thing. And so, yeah, I don't want to give the impression to the listeners to not take this stuff seriously, because by mindset and by soul group, I'm very much a warrior. A lot of my past lives have been as a warrior in a variety of cultures here on Earth, and quite frankly, off-world as well. So that's very much part of my makeup. But I've also had to learn the way the Shaolin monks have taught for generations, that you can open up a can of whoop-ass when you really need to. But then at the next moment, you could be grounded, you can be centered, you could be humbled, and you could be, sniffing a flower, right? So we need to have that inner harmony, that inner calm, which they're trying to take away from us by bombarding us with fear and all these real and imaginary threats. So we need to be that sea of tranquility within this kind of maelstrom, which
I so agree with you
trying
on that.
to create
well
around
said.
us.
I have such a strong resonance with everything you just said. And to me, it's really cueing people also that if they don't like their freedoms extracted from them, if they don't like people telling them how to walk, talk, think, or act, just take it a step further and understand where I've been with the technology, where it was internalized with a signal, and I had no choice but to hear, to listen, to see, to be animated. And I'm telling you, as strong as I am, and I'm a very powerful person, physically, spiritually, emotionally, it is a hard thing to ride out. It is a very hard thing to ride out. And if you want your freedom, I'm telling you, you will not have freedom when you get programmed into that communication system. This is why we're standing up and being counted. And those who want to be in that communication system, well, it's a hive. It's just going to be a hive, and it's not going to be educational, because from what I understand and what I've experienced is that it's really just limited. I mean, it's only as good as the people that program it.
This is true, and what these people twiddling the knobs and the gophers, the lower-level echelons that carry out a lot of the mind control at the behest of their masters, they're all expendable. They're all interchangeable parts. If there ever came a time when, say, the elite, and there's some evidence that this may already be going on, that some have decided to go off-world and leave this planet because maybe they know something is coming down that they're not letting their underlings know about. Well, what these underlings need to know is they're not invited. They're not invited to the underground bases to ride out the storm. They're not going to be allowed onto the craft or allowed through the stargates to get off-world if things get too hot and heavy down here. They're expendable. They may feel a surge of pride and a surge of ego because they're part of some big, faceless, all-powerful, monolithic organization, unlimited funding, et cetera, but when it comes right down to it, they're expendable, and in the most extreme way, because if they feel the need to make examples, they will just start capping people who step out of line, who don't do their jobs well enough, whatever the case may be. This is how tyrannical empires operate. And so these minions, these lower-level underlings, they need to understand their true place in the pecking order. They're not that important. And so if they ever wanted to pull the plug and get out of this system,
I agree.
Now's the time to do it, because pretty soon they
totally
won't have
agree.
that option
And insofar
anymore.
as Stargates go, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, so every chakra system we have, our chakras are Stargates. Yeah, they're dimensional stargates, and people don't seem to realize this.
Exactly.
It's so amazing. But once you unify those, you get this 0-point transmission of multidimensional Merkaba, and that's when you can navigate. So literally, we have all the components. The universe is a beautiful thing. It gives us all the components within our cellular structure, our atomic structure, our DNA. We have all this technology naturally built in for ascension. We just need to activate it. So there's none of this, we have to go through here to get there. We don't need a middleman. We don't need these controllers. We don't need these people trying to control, manipulate us on a mass scale. We have to surrender our souls and our spirits and our free will to something that's going to give us an illusion. So that's the part that people need to really snap out of. And I totally agree with you. We have the universal given is that we are allowed to ascend. And we have to remind ourselves of this, that we can move on and ascend. And I do see society kind of imploding. I see everything kind of flatlining. But that's supposed to happen. I mean, we're supposed to go through this process of the linear world dissipating and being absorbed by higher dimensional spaces and frequencies.
Yes, I agree. There's this notion that if we just tune out all this negativity, that somehow we're going to manifest this kind of utopian world. But that in itself is contradictory, because there are countless people out there who don't notice the chemtrails being created right over their head. They don't notice when their own children are being harmed by vaccines. So those people are creating a reality by allowing it to happen. So how could the relative few who wish for a better reality override the reality that's already manifested for these people that are apathetic, that are completely out of the loop, that are completely indoctrinated into believing what's been presented to them? So what we have to do is get out of this mindset that we have to rescue everybody, that we have to be kind of like a messiah or a champion for everybody. It always starts with the first circle, ourselves. We cannot hope to be a leader or to help others and encourage others if we don't first do the internal work that's necessary, and to be true to oneself and true to one's own internal moral compass. And only then can we even hope. And I would never presume to be anyone's leader, right? I encourage others, and I wish the best for others, and I share information that I believe is empowering and uplifting to others. However negative some of the content may be, some of this stuff needs to be gotten to those who are in the trenches, that are going through the kinds of experiences you've described. They're not going to get it from Fox News. They're not going to get it from CNN. It's got to come from somewhere. So what we've done is we've decided to be information agency. If people realize the power they have in and of themselves, the first circle, that's where it all starts. And every one of you listening, you could have your own podcast shows. You could be your own. You can do activism at your own level that you're comfortable with. You can get in deep, as far deep as you want to go, that you're at a level you're comfortable with, and still make a ripple effect, still make a difference.
You're a teacher without a doubt, and I'm the same way. I mean, you said the first circle, that a book came to mind, so keep that in mind if you're planning on writing. We're here to relay data and here to represent the truth and be the pillars of light. We're here to represent and inform people what's really happening here, so it awakens them. It doesn't make them fearful. It just prepares them that these are the things that are going on, and that it's their free will and their free choice, but let them have free will. My goodness, let them have the information that they can make a decent choice, right? Instead of just lying and deceiving people. I think that's the biggest problem I had, was that how can you deceive the masses with all these projects? And I mean, let them by their own choosing create what they want, and of course that's how the cosmos works.
Yes, and what I would encourage people to do, and I've spoken about this many times, is they really need to start tuning into energies and frequencies. And when they're presented with information from this, that, or the other researcher, investigator, whistleblower, whatever the case may be, yes, it's important to listen with our auditory senses, but it's also important, even more so, I believe, to tune into that source of information's energetic field, to tune into their waveform, if you will, and see how it resonates with one's own being. Our body communicates to us. Different parts of our body, our solar plexus, our heart center, our throat, different parts of our chakra system, different parts of our body, and our energetic field around us will tell us a story if we learn how to listen. We're taught from an early age to be logical, but the problem is they shunt us into the left hemisphere of the brain and feed us nothing but indoctrination, dogma, and lies. And so we're caught too much in our own headspace rather than tuning into the environment the way an animal does. Right? We get caught up in our headspace, and we get misled by all these people who are false prophets, false gurus, false whistleblowers. People really need to start tuning into energy and tuning into frequency, and listen to what your body tells you, and then trust your own intuition, trust yourself. And sometimes it's a battle between what I call Mr. Spock, the logical mind, and also our intuitive sense. And then people really have to find that happy median where they can kind of utilize both to maximum effect. Because there's a lot of deceit, there's a lot of treachery out in the field that we're in. As you know, there's so many people out there that that speak out of both sides of their mouths, and it's creating a lot of confusion.
I agree.
And
I
a lot
think some
of
of that's due to
discord
mind
within the
control and
field.
alters kicking in to give them disinformation. Yeah, I totally agree. Follow your psychic radar, without a doubt.
Follow the psychic radar and listen to what your own body tells you. And since we're on the subject of galactic humans, from your perspective as a galactic human, what are the keys, the things that people need, and each one has to figure this out on their own, to be sure. But what have you done over and above what you've done to overcome the external interference? What have you done to, as you stated earlier, recalibrate yourself to get you back on the track of being a
well, the one thing I'm doing is trying
human?
to get back to what I was doing before they inducted me. Well, obviously I don't have my family anymore, and a lot of things have changed. But I'm at least training. I'm getting back into my martial arts the way I used to. I don't have classes yet, but the idea of moving my energy into the continuum of what works for me versus what they wanted me to be, and doing all these careers that I really didn't want to do, like surveillance, and I'm good at it, but literally that was Mossbach's thing. It wasn't mine, but I was pulled into it. So just being more me insofar as what I resonate with as a multidimensional being, and integrating back all of the things that they try to steal from me and sweep away, which it's a process, but that's what I do to take my power back from day to day and always stay focused on the stars. Although I'm grounded, I'm always focused on the cosmos. The universe is my multiversal benchmark is connected to Source. So my higher self, oversoul, superconscious merged with Source. That's how I move from, it's like the chessboard. You move from your center to Source and through Source, but I try to navigate away from all this other stuff that's what I call turbulence here. So, and reminding ourselves of our divinity, reminding ourselves that we are multidimensional, reminding ourselves that everything is in flux right now on the timeline and that nothing's permanent. Everything is energy and consciousness, and that is huge because as we understand the consciousness factor, we manifest each day, as you know, everything we can create.
This is true, and I've had to do the same thing. I've had to remind myself of my galactic origins, and I'm one of those people that are fortunate that I have an idea of where in the cosmos I've been in the past, where I've lived, and what star systems I've been to, and even at times it seems I have a good understanding of which ET groups of the more benevolent variety that I have a connection to. So in my case, it wasn't simply negative experiences with negative beings of various stripes, interdimensional, extraterrestrial, whatever the case may be. I always knew that there was a spiritually evolved, extended ET family, if you will, that I was a part of. I knew that fairly early on. And then I got around certain people. I had great teachers in this life that helped me understand that facet of myself even more. They brought out the best of me. I feel because I've been a student a lot of my life, and I've been the beneficiary of a lot of great teaching. And so when I realized that yes, I'm grounded, I'm embodied, I'm in rapidly evolving 3D, but I'm also of the stars. I'm also plugged into this greater womb of the universe above, the starry night sky that we see above us. Symbolized by the Egyptian goddess Nut, right, with the starry belly overarching, and so when one realizes, yes, I'm a part of that, that's a good feeling, and it's empowering also, not in an elitist sense, but from the standpoint that my oversoul and the extended ET star family that I'm from sent me here, and I volunteered to be here for a reason. And when I get around, either online or in person, around people like us, quite frankly, again, I don't mean this in an elitist sense. It's just that, they like to break us up into demographics, break us up into groups, and there are certain groups that we tend to identify with. And so it's very easy for me to identify with a person such as yourself that thinks and feels in a higher dimensional galactic way of thinking, because it brings the best out of me. It reminds me that this matrix simulation that we're surrounded in is an illusion, that it's here to entrap us, that if we focus our attention and our intentions to source, where we're truly from, all kinds of doors open for us. And what's interesting is Greg Braden talks about this in his Divine Matrix books, that with the right intentions and with the proper energetic vibe pushing those intentions, the multiverse, the universe will respond in the form of answers, in the form of opportunities and good fortune. So we just have to ride that frequency wave and remember that we are in this world. We are
in this world, but not of it.
What's the saying? It's that's right. It. We're in this world, but we're not of it. And when our listeners and everyone realizes this, we're in this world, but we're not of it. I think that great strides will be made all across the board, because then we'll be tuning into higher dimensional sources and frequencies.
Think about it, James.
And
think about all the megalithic structures across the globe here and how they're all coordinates are connected to Orion or other areas in the cosmos. This is a reminder of our divinity.
Yes.
There was their benchmark of saying, hey, you're from there. This is your starseed consciousness heritage, your celestial heritage. The soul's essence of origin is not from here. And as we come from the stars, we go back to the stars. We go home. Not that, to me, this is a temporary zone. It's a way station to some degree, and we are ascending, and we are moving on in multidimensional design works. And I totally resonate with what you're saying completely. I feel the same way about you. It's so refreshing to communicate because we are reminders to each other of the starseed consciousness, our starseed heritage. And when I received my soul descension, it descended in, and it's not from here. So that happened before my induction, and that mutated my body quite a bit. So that's a very powerful Arcturian frequency that's integrated in with me, and that was before 2004. So
yes, the Arcturian frequency is really coming to the forefront now, all across the board. It's manifesting through a lot of different people. It's manifesting through more and more sightings of Arcturian ships, of uniquely Arcturian experiences. Like a friend of mine was looking at Arcturus one evening, and suddenly it just bloomed, got really bright, and then blew apart. And then where there was a bright Arcturus there a moment before, now there was empty space. Of course, it didn't disappear. It was just kind of a visual spectacle for that Arcturian starseed to let them know, yes, we know of you, we know where you are, you're from us, and you're there to anchor a higher frequency. And so I'm running into more and more people that have this sensibility about them, this Arcturian carrier wave.
Right, and I want to say one thing, too.
About them.
There's a mirror between worlds. In other words, once you realize that the mirror is there, you can go through the mirror. In other words, the door swings both ways. And if people understand consciousness, and this is how, we hear it all the time, how ET gets home, is through consciousness, which means calibrate your consciousness to harmonize with upper dimensional grid works and star systems. When you do this, you're able to navigate, set the intent to navigate to these destinations. Your body's going to start to calibrate to another dimensional frequency in space. And believe it or not, capabilities like phase shifting, bilocating, taking your body with you through stargates is actually just like very, very possible. And I know you're familiar with this. We are we're very in tune and calibrated to upper dimensional design work.
Yes, we are. And it's better to do it that way than in a haphazard way where people take it for granted that they have this higher dimensional aspect of themselves, and they go to sleep, and they wind up dimension hopping, having all these astral travels, winding up in all these alternate realities where worlds that look very similar to ours, slight differences in architecture, little things like that. And one knows that they're in this kind of alternate reality. They interact with the people. They like on one occasion, I walked into I had this alternate reality experience in my dream state, and I walked into this what appeared to be a municipal court building, and I sat there for what seemed like hours, and I watched this court proceeding, right? And I thought it was interesting. I mean, I knew intuitively that it was not our planet, our world, that it was some other alternate reality, and I just decided, okay, I'll just check out the scene for a while, and then I'll go away. And then I went to some other kind of reality. I was doing a lot of bouncing around that night.
And I feel like a lot of the time there's a dream pool collective where people get sucked into alternate dream times of other people's realities, and that we've got to take our power back and set the parameters, as I was saying. Otherwise, people can get swept away in another dream. I've had situations where I know that a program's run and I didn't create it.
Yes. So the dream hacking, as some describe it, is pervasive, where you're just sucked into someone else's version of reality, and then you're just forced to endure it and go through it. I talked about astral dimensions on one of your shows before, and that's become a problem for a lot of people, where they find themselves in an astral experience in some place where they can't get out of, whether it's a place simulated to look like a detention facility, a classroom, a big walled-in city. They can't get out. They're just stuck there, and time passes excruciatingly slow. No matter what they do, they can't find an exit. They can't will themselves back to their body, even if they're an experienced astral traveler. And so the controllers, whoever they may be in this instance, know that we have an energetic body that they can tap into and can plug into these astral detention centers, for lack of a better term. And so people have had to overcome that. They've had to learn ways to thwart that, and learn ways to overcome this. It's always about adaptation, making the adjustments, physical, spiritual, energetically, and that's one thing that I've always strived to do is be malleable. Like Bruce Lee talks about water, the ability at any time to conform to any terrain, any circumstance, rather than being mentally rigid, inflexible, and wedded to a certain way of thinking. Such thinking is not applicable to every situation, especially in this flux situation we're in now. We have to start thinking more multidimensionally, more like the quantum beings that we used to be. And then when we find ourselves in these kinds of scenarios, I'm talking particularly those people that have this capability encoded within their DNA. Many people do. So when they do find themselves in these scenarios that you outlined earlier, then it's not a surprise. Then you can make the most out of the experience. Then you can learn the most from it.
I totally
and
agree.
Make the most out of the situation. We're in a situation now where it goes back to the first circle. The controllers are doing everything they can to pull the plug, to really bring the hammer down. And I see it as acts of desperation. People have heard me talk about this before. Everything they do, every hoax, false flag event, every manipulation of the financial markets, every new social engineering stunt they pull is an act of desperation, because they're literally in a race with this mass awakening. There are, different demographics within this mass awakening, and there are different levels of awakening, in a given individual or community. But in general, there are a lot of people waking up, and they have to put everything in place before there's just too many people that are awakened for them to control. And so, so like the Brexit, the Britain leaving the EU, I think that was a good thing. It was a repudiation on the part of the people of the UK, of Great Britain, saying, we don't want this anymore. We're tired of this. We're tired of you dictating every last detail of our lives, right? And so in the overall scheme of things, how much of a dent it's made into the system, we'll never know, until further down the track. But as an opening gambit, as doing something that needed to be done, yes, it was a milestone. That was a milestone, and people can't underestimate that. And I think that we're going to see more of that as time goes on.
Countries are going to pick up the pace with that, absolutely. And you're right, they're just trying to run interference and hold everybody in limitation, because, the last thing they need are people who are avatars in consciousness we're able to navigate beyond the spectrum and the illusions and the lies. And that's another thing, the lies of mankind for century after century after century. I mean, we're unraveling of the lies. Now we don't believe that what they're communicating, these cabals. We understand they're liars. We understand there's deception. We understand that there's a celestial heritage involved here, and that even the disclosure concepts, we don't need disclosure. We are disclosure. We are the star seeds. So what do we need them for?
You're right.
I mean, we are the power. We have to remind ourselves. We have to take the power back. And I think you're right. Just step by step, we're just taking the helm back. We're literally steering it back.
And that's a very good point about disclosure, Solaris, because much ado about nothing as far as here in the Western world. There's all these groups out there. I know that I'm going to upset a lot of them, but and a lot of them are well-intentioned, these exopolitics groups and disclosure groups, so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is disclosure has already happened in places like Russia and Japan, where and many of the Latin American countries, where they take it for granted that there are non-human intelligences not only here on the planet but amongst us. And we've seen time and time again official announcements from various governments around the world about the reality of non-human life forms and whatnot, alien, if you will. It's only here in the West that this whole disclosure movement has been, in my view, co-opted, because they've married it with the whole concept with the political process. What they're doing essentially is they're saying, well, if we can get this or that main political group to embrace disclosure of the reality of alien life here on this planet. I remember in the early 1990s, Japan was threatening to release all their available information, or at least some of it, about what amounted to their own Japanese Roswell, their own crash retrieval of an alien spacecraft. Right. And suddenly they were shut down, and we know what's happened to Japan since then. So disclosure is really just a means of legitimizing controlling cabal. Then we tacitly approve of everything you've done in our name. We are disclosure.
When you have what we call soul extensions, we are multidimensional, which means we exist simultaneously in other dimensions. We cannot forget that we mutate into our, at times, a form of a type of being which can appear as extraterrestrial. So don't be surprised if you all start to morph and look a little bit different. I'm not saying you're going to do this huge transformation, but I will say you will find that you will have more aspects of your what we call celestial heritage integrated in. And we are, by all terminology, we are not from here. You can consider yourself an alien. I call us off-worlders. We are off-worlders on a timeline. End of story.
Yes, and I've already started to see manifestations of what you just described, where from moment to moment, from photograph to photograph, people's faces change. And they're quite pleasing changes. Their faces could be more angular all of a sudden. Their eyes could take on a different shape. The pupil could suddenly look a little different. These are all manifestations of this currency, this frequency wave that we're riding. And some people, like ourselves, we embrace it. We embrace the celestial galactic aspect of ourselves, the higher dimensional aspects of ourselves. We don't block it. We don't try to hinder it in any way. We allow it to flow through us. We allow it to make the necessary changes within our DNA profile. It's a very good idea to... So if we regulate ourselves to the point where we're constantly on this upward kind of vibe.
And you, of course, with the psychotronics and other types of interface, you can morph too. But I do know that there's a natural process of ascension where we shapeshift, basically, is what's going on. So, yeah. Yes.
And the term shapeshift should not be scary to the listeners, those that are familiar with my work and familiar with the work of others. Because throughout the lore of human history, there's always been these stories of shape-shifting, whether someone shape-shifts into like a wolf or into a lion or a tiger or whatever the case may be. We hold the DNA profile of every kind of being we've ever been throughout our many incarnations. In truth, our incarnations run parallel. There is really no past. There's only the eternal now and different frequency variations thereof. So in a very real sense, our higher dimensional ET selves are are in parallel existences, and it's getting to the point, Solaris, and I know you've probably experienced this or heard this, but some people are not only having encounters with benevolent, highly evolved ETs, they're starting to have encounters with benevolent, higher evolved versions of themselves. They're meeting themselves. The frequencies have increased to such an extent that now not only positive, higher dimensional ETs can, at least for a certain length of time, interact with us, but our higher selves, our variations of our oversoul that are already aliens, if you will.
When you get to certain levels of light body, and your body does all the emotional clearing, the mental clearing, the four-body system clearing, and you start calibrating, you can actually be preparing yourself at the vibratory rate to have that aspect of you descend in permanently, which is what happened to me, as I touched on earlier. The soul descension actually connected in. And I'll tell you, you can tell it's not like you have this altar. It's like you bring in so much of your divinity that it just becomes this pillar of light. It's the most beautiful, sacred experience. And I have to tell you, it has to be the most peaceful experience I've ever had. A
higher dimensional aspect of ourselves will visit us in times of crisis, in the dark night of the soul, if you will. Whether this occurs in childhood, in our teenage years, in middle age, they will sometimes show up to us and reassure us and tell us things like, this is something you've got to go through, but just hang in there, keep working through it. You'll come out of this okay. I'll be here with you the whole time. And they may think it's a spirit guide. They may think it's an extraterrestrial guide, but really, in some cases, it's themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's good news, because it means they've already made it. It means that they've already overcome whatever these challenges are. And sometimes, Solaris, these higher dimensional ET versions of individuals, they look quite like their normal selves. Just they may be a little taller. They may be like a shade of blue or something. They may be a little more radiant. And they may be wearing a flowing, effervescent gown or something, but it still looks like them, just kind of like a higher dimensional version of themselves. So and that's good news.
Absolutely.
It means that we're starting to merge and reintegrate at all levels. And so I see good things on the horizon. It's going to be a bumpy road between now and the time when we finally dismantle this matrix simulation. And we finally have total personal sovereignty all across the board. So we've reached the end of the second hour, and I really want to thank you, Solaris, for coming onto the show, and I definitely want to have you on again.
And for anybody who wants to access my website, it's Night Shadow Anomaly Detectives. You can go into my website, and I have my DVD documentary, Eye of the Remote, A Disclosure of Covert Technology, there for sale if you want to purchase that. My books are all available on Amazon.com, from Transmutation Through Ascension, Eye of the Remote, Black Operations and Areas Beyond 52, Programmed by Deception, and Mr. Sun and the Halloween Ball. I also have a science fiction book that's getting ready to be released called 1 Million Miles to Midnight. So, feel free to contact me also. I'm on Facebook. You can locate me. My hyperspace show is on KCOR, Friday nights, 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time, and I've got all sorts of stuff going on.
Well, thank you very much, Solaris. You have a great day wherever you're at, and then what we'll do is we'll have you definitely on the show sometime in the future, and I can't wait to connect with you again, both on the show and also in private. So with that being said, thank you for listening. This is James Bartley, the Cosmic Switchboard Show, and you've just been listening to my very special guest, Solaris Blue Raven. Good evening, good day, wherever you're at, all my listeners. Have a great day.